check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Nicole Juergens, highly uncircumcised. What's up, lady?
Oh, you know how it is. We are committed to giving the real story behind the news.
The real the behind the news.
The highly uncircumcised story. This is not mainstream media. That's MSM. That's what I was looking for. This is not MSM. This is highly uncircumcised. This is a real shit.
We are not mainstream.
No, we are. No, we are not. We have 63 followers.
We are highly uncut. We have minimal viewers. But we're raw and authentic.
Yes, we are. People don't want that. They don't want the truth.
They don't want that.
They want to be fed the lies.
Who wears a red bow on the mainstream media? Just stop it.
Nobody.
Just stop it. I'll shut my computer right now. You just stop it. Don't even talk to me. Listen, in our last episode, we were talking about are we as a society eating ourselves to death? A society where I think we're just keeping it to America right now. Because the world probably actually sees things differently, but
yeah, and I don't think Europe actually does. I mean, they're much more. They move much. I mean, if you go to Europe, you can look at the people. They are
a lot of biking, a lot of walking, a lot of public
everywhere, mass transportation. Right. They're all thin. They're all like, I mean, a vast majority compared to us. Where like I would say it like this because for those that you say, well, it's privilege because it's a greater percentage of people are overweight in poor communities, which I'm sure is true, but the greater percentage of our entire population is overweight, whether you're in a poor community or not. When I used to go to Omaha with my ex, and I remember this one time flying home with both of our children. By the way, I was overweight myself at the time, so it's not like, oh, them, they're, but I had just had my son and I was literally in line to get on the plane, and I looked in front of me and everybody looks very nice and presentable and they're sweet. This is the Midwest, Midwest nice. And every single one of them is overweight. Every single one. Doesn't matter the race, the color, whatever. And I was like, wow, like this is indicative of what is happening in our country. Like it's in people are going to get upset for me saying that, but that's just the problem. Like, how can you be upset when it's true?
So can I let you into the mind of Michael Moore a little bit? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So I like to do a lot of thinking, as you know, and a lot of processing and a lot of analyzing. And actually, I really, one of the bright spots of our relationship is I listen to a lot of things you say. And initially, I tend to think they're crazy. And then I will do some research. And a lot of times, they become very, very valid and legitimate points. Why am I saying that? Because I'm giving a lot of thought now to this vaccine, but higher level. Why did COVID do what it did to our country in terms of the devastation? Because like literally, I think America I feel like it was at the top of the list in terms of how COVID, destroyed, lives and all that kind of stuff, both in terms of death and loss of jobs and economy and all that kind of stuff. And all of that is to get to a point where I want to ask you a question, which is, do you think our government on some level wants us unhealthy? Does it go back to the whole like Loki episode where us being unhealthy and in need of medicines and the medical community and all that kind of stuff will keep us like subjugated to their will, whatever that will may be? And I don't pretend to be smart enough to know right now what the government's whole agenda would be, but do you think there's any merit to that thought? I'm just curious.
Well, I think I started to answer this a little bit last time, and I don't think it starts with that. Like, let's just keep the people subjugated. But I think it starts with the people who have all the money, right? And they're able to lobby the government, professionals to get things done the way they want it. And so, I mean, you can go back to the top and look at everything. We have food subsidies for foods that are making us fat, right? We have millions of dollars of food subsidies for our population that are, the food itself is making us fat. That's because lobbyists of corporations that have a lot of money then get into the government. So I don't think that government necessarily actively tries to subjugate their people or make them fat, but the way that the system has set up, without us using our, again, like I say, we outsourced our thinking, without the general population thinking for themselves, then they'll just take what's offered, right?
So it's bottom line thinking is what you're saying. It's all comes down to money and not necessarily like a nefarious agenda.
No, I think, unfortunately, I think the great thing about America is we have a capitalist society. I think that is actually the number one thing that keeps us so free. And if you disagree, read anything from Ayn Rand, anything from her.
But you realize capitalism by definition means that someone has to be capitalized on.
Listen,
so it's by no means a perfect economy, in my opinion, but that's a whole nother thing.
Of course. But when it's allowed to be truly capitalistic and not allowed to make monopolies, which our utilities companies do, which is ridiculous, right? Our government gets involved and takes the capitalism out of it. But again, you're right. That's a whole nother story. But where was I going with that, though?
You were talking about the beauty of capitalism.
So I am happy that we do have this society. I believe truly it allows us to have the freedoms that we have. The downside is what you're saying, is that in order to have a capitalist society, people have to be capitalized on. And what can happen in a capitalist society is that greed at the top can then trickle down and cause major problems for those at the bottom, right? And I think that's where we are right now in our government. If we don't remember that we are free and that we elect our officials to work for us, not telling us what to do, not telling us how we have to live. If we remember that, then a lot of, I think the story could be different. But we're allowing them to run the show and then talk about it on the mainstream media, and then everyone's eating it up and then spitting out. I mean, you can see, if you look at social media, anytime there's like a controversial post that really divides people, you can see the comments are literally like titles of news stories. Like, somebody didn't think for themselves to give whatever their opinion was, whether it's for or against whatever the news story was, but they literally just repeated what they have heard before on the news. And so I can't stress enough that I don't think that it's necessarily the government tried to be nefarious. Are there people who are? Yeah, for sure. But money's going to win out in the end. Money's always going to win out. Like we said before, everybody has a price. And for those people who have all the money, which are the pharmaceutical companies and right, and the big tech and whatever, who became even more rich while the rest of us became even more poor during the pandemic, they have the money to create the story of our lives if we let them.
Now, see, that's, and I feel like there's a huge rabbit hole we're about to sojourn, but I feel like all of this is one big, just corrupt stew that screws over you and me and everybody that looks like us. So
what's all of this? You specifically COVID specifically government?
Everything. So you can go everywhere from, you were talking about capitalism and so forth. If we were truly a capitalist society, why in the world in 2008 and 2009 were all the biggest industries bailed out? I don't know anyone that's ever been bailed out by the government, sans this whole like PPP loan stuff that they just did and all that kind of stuff. PPP loans, by the way, right? The government gave money to big banks that, by the way, were trying to reject the money, saying, we don't even need it. Why should we take your cash? And they basically got threatened and said, believe me, if you don't take this cash, we're going to remember you in the future when, there's a need or so forth or so on. I don't know anyone that's ever been bailed out by the government. I don't want to talk about welfare. I don't want to talk about EBT. I don't want to talk about any of that crap. Give me a break. That's just poor people with the government on their necks, and they're going to stay poor. And that's just how that is. And I don't say that in a way where I don't care. I say that because I think it's all bullshit. I think that stuff like that, I think that, and I was telling you before we even started the recording of the podcast that, and I was right about the whole COVID thing, by the way, how long it was going to go on and all that kind of stuff. I feel like I see this in the same way, which is I feel like this Delta variant is basically just a new uh sort of indication of what's going to happen in the future after the sun is not as bright and hot and it's fall and people are start going back inside. I think they're going to start making us put on masks again. I think they're going to start restricting movement. And
All of this they can't do if we say no. And now
we don't get together on anything. And here's a point that I was driving to, Nicole, and forgive me for interrupting you, but this all kind of leads, I think we're actually probably going to the same place. You know, ever since I've known you, you have always talked to me about, like, Mike, shut off the news. Stop watching the news. You would see me freaking sitting at the poker table reading articles and you'd be like, oh, shut that shit, like your phone and all that kind of stuff. Like, stop reading that. And obviously, you know, there's some influence there because I respect you, and, you know, there's got to be a legit reason why you think that. And as I told you months ago, when I stopped really watching news all the time, I started seeing how drained I was by watching the news. Okay, where am I going with this? I just noticed in the last couple weeks that every time I open up my news feed in Yahoo with the Associated Press and all the articles that one gets to see, there's always basically some article about the government, something going on, like this building falling in Miami and how that's being handled. Okay, that's big news. Somewhere around 2 or 3 stories later, it'll be like a Kardashian type story. Some celebrity did something to someone somewhere, and who gives a damn? You literally couldn't remember it 3 minutes after you read it. And then inevitably, for me, the next story is always some example of racism. Some cop did something to someone somewhere. Somebody walked into Starbucks and the person behind the counter was not nice to them. Somebody got pulled over for having a broken taillight and got taken to jail. Listen, you know this about me. I am the first person to be like, you know what? That was bullshit. That was racism. Like, this is just nonsense. But what I'm seeing is, like, I feel like there is a concerted effort by someone, some news media outlet, the government, I don't know who, but to basically continue to just stir crap. Like, they always want us on fire.
To keep us divided, right?
Exactly.
While they get to do whatever they want with all their money.
Thank you.
Keep us inner fighting against each other. All of us with the, you know, the middle class.
On the bottom of the barrel. I really consider like 80 to 90% of Americans at the bottom of the barrel. I don't care if you make $250,000 a year or if you make $50,000 a year. It does not compare to anyone in the top 10, 5, 3% of the country. I don't care if you drive a Mercedes, because we know people that could drive 50 Mercedes and it wouldn't set them back 2% of their net worth. So none of that matters. We're all fighting over scraps, and we're fighting each other over stuff like, you look different than me, or you worship different than me, or you don't worship at all, you know, and it's just all just stuff to keep us divided. But more importantly to this conversation, Nicole, distracted. Mm-hmm. I really believe there's an effort, there's an agenda to keep us distracted from what's really going on, which is new billionaires.
Well, I love that you say that, because I think, in why I never watch the news, I think that's entirely what it is. There's no actual news on the news. There's no actual story that's going to really tell you. Like, I want to hear real, like, when there's actual journalism that actually will dive into a story. Now they'll make a documentary out of it, because they can't put it on the news, you know, the Assange or Snowden, or, you know, the real actual journalism, the real things that are happening are not on the news. That's everything that's on there is distraction. I felt like when Trump was running for office, whether you love him or hate him, I was wondering what was happening underneath it all. I felt like his entire presidency was a distraction. And now COVID came up. I'm like, I wonder if this was it. If this is what they were spinning while they had his face in front of everybody. And this is definitely going to sound, crazy to people. I don't give a shit. Like, the news is to keep you distracted 100%. I love that you use that word, because that's 100% what it is. Just keep you distracted if you want to really get deep in Eckhart Tolle, and keep you distracted and identified with your ego. And your ego is like, this is my identity and this is it. And so, you see the news and this is what I believe. And I agree with these people and everyone else is wrong. And it keeps us so egoic and unconscious. And all we do is fight against each other. Us little ones, it's like little ants fighting against each other, while the fucking giant just crushes us however they want, whatever they want to do. They can do whatever they want.
Okay, I'm with you 100%. But now the question, Nicole, is why? Why do they want us distracted? That's the thing that scares me. That's the thing that gives me pause. Because to me, it's like the Matrix. Once you've taken the red pill and you can now see the code, okay, what's going on behind the scenes? What's the purpose, right? So in the Matrix, they were harvesting human beings for batteries.
Yeah.
But what is it that they want? That's what I want to know. What is it that they want?
They want to be able to spend their money on whatever. So right now, let's see, they just had the and they barely touched on it, right? In the news was that BlackRock, the major financial asset management company, basically bought up massive amounts of property across the entire United States in the last year. They came in and overbid everybody and bought all this property up, which makes sense now too when you think like, wow, how is the market booming during a pandemic, right? So this asset management company comes in, buys up everything in order to, in the future, what are we going to have? Nobody's going to own anything, right? Everyone's got to rent. Everyone's got to, like, these are the things that happen, like the real stuff that happens behind the scenes that aren't barely even touched in the news, right? It's like,
so
we keep us divided. Oh, we're all in it together with COVID, and look at this and look at, that's not the news.
So I'm glad you brought that up about just I want to touch on that real quick, like the real estate thing, right? And the news. So how in the world does anyone look at the news, read information that they're disseminating over the course of 2020 and decide for themselves that it makes any sense that the housing market is literally rolling in a way that has never rolled in the history of real estate? I'm telling you right now, a house sold 4 houses down from me 2 weeks ago for $4 million. And I'm telling you right now, this house is literally $2 million overpriced. And someone decided it was worth it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, who are all these people with the money? Because you're trying to tell us that COVID just destroyed everybody, and everybody's net worth went into decline, and everybody's job prospects went into decline.
The middle class, the rich,
but the middle class seems to be the ones who are buying all of these houses for the 1.5 and $2 million.
That's what you think.
Well, that's why I'm confused. To help me out here, help a brother out.
But just like what I just said about BlackRock, I mean, the major corporations are coming in and buying. They said in the 80s and 90s that China bought the vast majority of our property, about a large percent.
Well, no, that was in the 2000s too.
So
offshore money for sure.
Like, these are the kind of things that, like, and at the end of the day, you're like, okay, whatever. But it's very telling about the health of our society when all we want to scream about is COVID and a Delta variant, when the real shit is just never even talked about, like, ever.
And this sort of brings us back as we circled the rabbit hole, like I said.
Oh yeah, I want to say something about that too.
The health of the country. And I, maybe it's my new soapbox because I'm really going hard in physical fitness again, and really caring about my family and their physical fitness and all that kind of stuff. Dude, we are like one of the most out of shape countries on earth. And what that means is it translates into mental health. Do you know there's a direct correlation with mental health and physical exercise? Do you know that?
100%. I mean, that's yes. So I guess we don't want to get too far into it, because we did start with saying this is about the government, and you asked about does our government have nefarious plans for us? And I don't believe that. I really don't. I believe it ends up being about money and small choices, being lobbyists and whatever small choices that every official makes ends up having big ramifications for us as a people. But I want to go back to that post that one time that I read from Sean Model on Instagram, and he says, Dr. Paul Weaver, former professor of political science at Harvard University, stated, "The news media and the government are entwined in a vicious circle of mutual manipulation, myth-making, and self-interest. Journalists need crises to dramatize news, and government officials need to appear to be responding to crises." And I think that really kind of wraps up how we get entangled in all of this as well. You know, same with the COVID, right? Like, the news needs a crisis, right? They need fear in order to sell, because apparently we love to be scared and we want to feel safe. We're trying to get safely to our death. All of us human beings, right? Like, we just get there safe. Like, I'm going to stay in the house under my bed my entire life until I die. Like, so news sells fear. And then the government needs to look like they are assuaging that fear, making us safer, right? And that's how we get wrapped up in this predicament that we're in. So, you know, that on top of the fact that unfortunately there's far too many lobbyist hands allowed in our government's officials' pockets, that greed can destroy basically our government if we're not careful. But we as a people can change that. We can choose to be free. We can demand to be free. And there were, just before this Delta variant news story came out, where and it just exploded, right before that, the same day, maybe even, because UK is going, many countries are going back on lockdown. UK had a massive parade, thousands in the street, saying this is ridiculous, like, stop this shit, which of course you don't see on the news in the US. In the news, there was about how many deaths there have been from the vaccine, about side effects that we didn't look at, about children having heart attacks and dying who were otherwise healthy. This was all coming out.
You're talking about kids that have been vaccinated?
Yes, I noticed this. This is all starting.
I actually saw that.
I'm like, hey, this is good. We're looking at both sides, even in the news. And then immediately, oh, the Delta variant, the Delta, scare, right? I was like, wow, isn't this a coincidence? The people were starting to become informed of both sides, but that's not okay to somebody who wants to turn their billions to trillions. So now it's Delta variant, scare. Oh my God, I got vaccinated, but now I need a third vaccine because of Delta variant, you know, like, we got to wake up.
Well, and they're already talking about boosters.
Yeah, we got to wake up. I mean, and again, I'm going to write this paper. It's a very long article about our health. Like you said, are we healthier? No. I mean, our vaccination schedule has fucking ramped through the roof in the last 30 years. Are we healthier? No. So what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? I mean, obviously vaccines are not, you know, the issue, or not the major issue, I hope. We have a lot of other issues in our country, but health and wellness, while we scream about it from the top of our lungs, is clearly not what we're after.
But so, you know, not to belabor this, but one of my biggest fears and points about all of this and biggest observations is that I don't know if people actually see the correlation between the direct effect of people not being healthy and how it affects everyone else. Meaning, I'm no doctor, I'm no clinical psychologist or anything like that, but why in the world is everybody shooting everybody else nowadays? Like, why? Like, I was just giving a thought.
Mental health issues.
Exactly.
And because we're not healthy, I mean, it affects everything. Like, when I see people say something like, oh, well, if you don't get the vaccine, and you better not be in the same room as me, and you better not get healthcare like I do because you're ruining the system. I was like, wow, do you realize that actually we are ruining our system by eating ourselves to death? Like, we are literally ruining our healthcare system.
Okay,
like,
but
how much we pay for that? Like, it's ridiculous.
I want someone who does this type of research, some doctor in whatever field that makes them an expert. I need for them to show me or do a study on why 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago, there were not as many mass shootings in this country as there are today. And you cannot tell me because the amount of guns has changed, because give me a break, there's always been the same level of guns and gun ownership and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I just think there are direct correlations with how we are taking care of ourselves and what we're being fed in the news, and how what we're being fed in the news is affecting us mentally, because they have done studies on people who like spend X amount of time on Facebook, let's say, every day, and what's in their news feed. So if what's in your news feed all day is Joe Biden's going to take your guns, the Democrats are going to do this, or if you're a Democrat, the news feed is they're going to overturn Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Court, and Republicans are arming themselves. All it really does is make people more nervous, more stressed out. What do? They eat. Then when they eat, they get bigger. When they get bigger and they're not working out, guess what? Their mental health declines. Like there's a direct correlation.
100%. 100%.
I feel like I just solved everybody's problems right now. I really feel like that. Is someone going to pay me for this information?
People have been saying that from the dawn. People who say that during this pandemic literally got censored. Like, not kidding, censored.
Oh, you're saying that was an original thought from me?
For suggesting, some writer said this one time, like, nobody has original words anymore. And I was like, what? I got all offended, like, what? And she's like, but we have unique ways of saying it. We're all individual people, right? And maybe when you say it, it'll wake somebody else up, right? Like, that's why it's a necessity almost to speak the truth, like to help as all of us evolve. And I want to say, I guess one thing we can end it on for just the whole, I guess, government. I mean, we could talk about government every single episode, I think, right? Like,
you go ahead and take the last word, sis. You do whatever you got to do.
I was going to make it really long, so I'm not. I'm just going to say you have to stop.
I was so waiting for it. I was like, this is going to be good.
Maybe next episode. We have to stop outsourcing our thinking. If no matter what anybody says, if I think it like this, if someone says something to you, like one time you said to me, like during the initial COVID, like you said, hey, everything you're saying, I can be on board with right now, but then also I can talk to somebody on the other side and I can completely understand everything they're saying. That's good. That's really good, right? To understand both sides. But also, after you do that, after you understand both sides, now you have to formulate your own thoughts, right? You have to decide what your truth is. And I think we are not doing that as a people. We are letting everyone else tell us what our truth is. And it is creating massive divisiveness, because I think once we do understand, like, and you say, well, what if my truth is different than somebody? It could be, but I think really when we get to it, like underneath it all, like when we get to the truth, like we'll all start to understand that we are in this together. Like we are out here speaking this truth because we care. Me and you, we care about people's health. Whereas what you will see from the government or mainstream media is not necessarily really caring about people's health. It's about caring about pocketbooks. And so they can, with trillions of dollars, they can spin any narrative they want. They can make us divided. They can keep us talking about everything but what they want us to talk about. But people like us who get censored for saying this stuff have no agenda, make no money from it, do not have trillions of dollars. We truly just want people to see, like, we have to be healthy. We have to wake up. We have to start thinking for ourselves. So I guess we'll end it on that.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that was just like, amen.
Amen. All right. We're going to continue because this is a week of the Delta variant. Be scared. Be scared. So we're going to continue.
Hold on.
The next episode. Get under your bed. Shelter in place. Get under the bed. The Delta variant is here. All right.
Goodbye.
Bye.